Good morning, everyone. So glad you're here joining me. We have a lot to talk about today and not a lot of time to do it. I'm going to do my best to keep this within the 30 minutes time frame that we're talking about because I want to respect your time. I know it's Saturday morning. We probably all have a lot of fun things planned, but there's a lot of very important topics we're going to talk about today. And it's something called social sabotage. So while I'm pulling up the slides here, I want us to consider the experience that many of us have likely had. And that is, we start to talk about getting in shape. We start to talk about making lifestyle changes. We start to talk about doing something that's great for our health. And when we're talking about it, when we're planning it, when we're considering it, the people that are regular figures in our life, right? Our friends, our family, our spouse, our partner, are very supportive. They're encouraging. They want us to be healthy. They want us to feel good about ourselves. But I'm curious if you've had the experience that when you actually start making those changes, something shifts. They start to act a little weird, less encouraging. They start to criticize more. They start to tell you that it's no longer needed, or their entire attitude around your journey to betterment is different. And when this happens, and it happens often, we call it social sabotage. And what we're going to talk about today is the fact that all of this odd behavior, the people that should be our biggest cheerleaders and supporters, turn into our biggest criticizers and the most difficult form of sabotage that we're likely to experience when we're doing the already hard task of changing our lifestyle. That behavior actually makes sense when we understand the underlying psychological mechanisms for why they happen, which you're going to learn today. But when we understand why they do it, also that it's predictable, we can recognize when these mechanisms are at play and when they're likely to become a part of the journey so that we can prepare ourselves for it and come up with some solutions and things that you can do tools that you can implement to start helping them shift the way they're interacting with you, to get ahead of this criticism, this social sabotage, so that you can push it down, you can eliminate it without conflict, without making it awkward, but in a way that's going to help them better help you as you're doing the already difficult task of getting in shape. Now, I want you to consider for a moment if you've ever heard any of the lines like this, and if you have your own version that you have heard from friends, family, spouse, partner, in the form of some sort of criticism or some sort of talking you out of a behavior that you're trying to adopt, a new routine you're trying to build. Something like, just one slice won't hurt if you're out for pizza with friends. Or maybe you're at a bar and they're telling you that, come on, have fun with us. One night's not going to ruin your diet when you're trying to make better choices. Sometimes they may even make the underhanded joke of, you're not fun anymore. You're too boring because you go to bed early, you spend all your time at the gym, and you're making healthy, unfun food choices. Or a slightly different form of social sabotage, where maybe they start to bring foods that are historically problematic for you, ones that you struggle to control yourself around. They start to bring them around more. They start to fill the house with more of those foods. They start to invite you out to eat more frequently when they know you're trying to do less of that. If you're thinking about this and you have examples in your own life, write them down. I encourage you to write them down because these are all forms of social sabotage. And a little bit later, we're going to talk about the different types of social sabotage and how you can begin to recognize the different types. Social sabotage is common. It's explainable by psychology. It's predictable by those very same mechanisms. And it's fixable. But if we want to be able to address and fix social sabotage, we have to understand that first layer of why it happens. And there's really three key reasons that people closest to you will be the biggest forms of sabotage that you experience. The first is group rules. The understanding that as groups or as humans, we are social creatures and we naturally, in whatever environment we're in, self-select ourselves into smaller units, into these groups. And there's some very unique things that happen when we become a member of a group. And that is that we develop rules, often implicit, seldom ever written or explained, but rules nevertheless that every group member follows. And when we start to shift our lifestyle, we actually start breaking some of those rules. And that is a big reason that we experience pushback from the other members of that group. So that's the first thing that we'll go into detail of. The second is pride, not your pride, their pride. Because the reality is when you start making changes to your lifestyle, it doesn't just impact you. It impacts everyone that's in regular exposure to you. And so even though we have opted in to make those changes, the other people in our life didn't always have a say. And so there's a very specific reason why they might push back against that. And the third, and probably the most unique, is something I call the table test. And this is more specifically in the case of romantic couples, but it still applies to other relationships, friends and family. But it's this idea that food, in a number of ways, and unless we're careful, actually becomes a measurement tool used to measure how healthy our relationship is. And when we start to change how we behave around food, it can reflect on the relationship. And that's called the table test. So these are the three main reasons why you're going to experience social sabotage. I said earlier that as humans, we naturally organize ourselves into groups. On the most fundamental level, the family unit, right? The nuclear family. We have our friendship circles, we have our social networks, we have our coworker pods. On a larger scale, we have countries, we have nations, we have states. And there's a reason that we, as social creatures, form into groups. And for the entirety of human existence, the main reason was for survival. When we got into groups, we were safer, we were more productive, we could find food better, and thus our rates of survival increased. So it is a natural, innate human tendency to want to form into groups. But it's not just for survival, because another reason that we form ourselves into groups is it helps establish our identity. And this is called social identity theory. When we get into groups, we usually organize ourselves based on shared values, based on shared interests, based on personality traits, based on familial connections. And when we're in these groups, it establishes our sense of our place in the world and who we are. And so it's interesting because when we form into these groups and it establishes our sense of identity, it also, this is very important, normalizes behavior. Whatever behavior is normal for our group, whatever that group engages in regularly is going to reflect on what we believe is normal. So here's a great example of this. If you have a group of friends where the thing you guys do together to enjoy each other's company is to go out and drink, then going out multiple times in a week and drinking multiple drinks is what you consider normal. There's nothing unusual about that. There's nothing harmful about that. That is your normal activity. If you have a separate group of friends and they are active, they go on hikes together, they play recreational sports together, their group identity is around movement, is around exercise. For that group, maintaining an exercise routine is probably going to be a lot easier because that's normal behavior. Being active is normal. Whereas if you're in the first group that goes out drinking and you're trying to do less drinking and more exercise, that's going to be significantly more difficult because it's not normal for that group. But here's what happens. When we are in these groups and when we're establishing our identity, one of the ways that we maintain that identity is to create those implicit group rules that I mentioned earlier. These rules, again, are seldom ever spoken aloud or even consciously recognized, but they're rules that everyone follows. A great example of this from the classic movie Mean Girls, I'm gonna skip ahead, is on Wednesdays we wear pink. That was their group rule. In the comedic sense of that movie, it was spoken out loud, obviously. But the reality is, our groups have rules like this around behavior, around what's normal, around activities that we should or shouldn't do that we follow without realizing it. And this creates an us versus them, right? Everyone in our group is a part of that. Everyone outside of our group are outsiders. And as a result of these group rules, and as a result of this us versus them, and the way that we organize the members of our group versus the ones that are not in our group, is there's a sort of favoritism, which makes sense. We prefer our friends versus strangers because we know our friends. They've earned that right, that privilege. Here's why this group rule structure is a big reason for social sabotage, and it's called the black sheep effect. And the black sheep effect is the reality that groups with rules, insiders are expected to follow the rules, outsiders are not, because they're not members of the group. But as a result of that structure, the black sheep effect, other members of the group will view someone who's not in the group, an outsider, better for breaking the rules than someone who's inside the group in breaking the rules. Put another way, this is why the friends that criticize you for trying to change your lifestyle habits and to get healthy might admire the very same behavior in some stranger that they follow on social media, an influencer. They might talk positively about this influencer for their discipline, for how frequently they're in the gym, for how well that they're eating, when they criticize you for the exact same behavior. Because that influencer is an outsider, and so they're not expected to follow the rules. But you, as an insider, a member of that group, are expected to follow their rules, which you are now breaking. So oftentimes when we get that criticism from people in our groups, again, friends, family, spouse, partner, one of the main reasons is because we are breaking the rules of what's normal. And the natural reaction to that is to try to correct that behavior, to try to get people to start following the rules again. And that's the black sheep effect. So this is the first and biggest reason why social sabotage exists from the people closest to you, is because you're breaking those rules. And when we break those rules, we're going to experience that backlash. The second reason that social sabotage happens is pride. In psychology, there's a concept called cognitive dissonance. And the only thing you need to understand about that term, cognitive dissonance, is that it is the idea that our behaviors and our thoughts need to be congruent. They need to match. So if we believe something is bad to do, then our behavior needs to not do it. But if we believe something is bad and our behavior says otherwise, then that creates a disconnect between our thoughts and our beliefs and our behaviors. And that is incredibly psychologically uncomfortable. This is the most widely studied concepts in psychology, cognitive dissonance. And so here's why it can come to play in this example in social sabotage, is because when we begin to change our lifestyle, sometimes the impact of that on the people in our lives is that it is a reminder to them of behavior and changes that they wish or want to make, but haven't been successful at. And that creates cognitive dissonance. Because as a member of the group, seeing you be successful reflects on them that they should also be able to carry out the same behaviors. But then they have the thought that they've not been successful, and that creates that incongruence, that mismatch that makes people feel uncomfortable. So how do they solve this? It's a concept called saving face. And ultimately, when we are having that psychological discomfort from the cognitive dissonance, the mismatch between beliefs and behaviors, is we have to find a way to make them match. And there's two ways we can do that. We can change our behavior to match our beliefs. In this case, being healthy is good. They should change their behaviors to be healthier. Or they change their beliefs, which in this case tends to be the easier solution, which is, yes, fundamentally being healthy is good. I'm not able to be consistent in those behaviors, and thus I'm going to change my beliefs about those behaviors. So saving face is this idea that they will change their beliefs. And when they see you adopting the behavioral changes, will now convince themselves that they're not good changes. This is why they'll tell you you're not fun anymore, because instead of drinking with them, you're doing something healthier like going to the gym. And so they convince themselves that going to the gym is boring, that it's too self-centered, that you're too superficial for wanting to change the way your body looks. So they will resolve their own discomfort by shifting their beliefs about how good or not good they believe the behavior you're engaging in is. Saving face. Now, this one is a little bit less common than obviously breaking the group rules. That one is pretty much universal. This one is a little bit more dependent on the person, but it still can happen commonly nevertheless. Okay. Also, to be clear, this one is about them, not you. There's nothing about you changing your behaviors that is a bad thing as it reflects on these people. But nevertheless, they will project that discomfort and those insecurities on the behaviors that you're being more successful with. The third reason that social sabotage happens, the most unique, my favorite, I call it the table test. I want you to consider this example for a moment. Let's say, in the context of a romantic relationship, let's say you're starting a new romantic relationship. You're starting to date this person. There's a lot of mutual interest. You could foresee it becoming something more serious. And if you're currently in a relationship, just think back to the time when you began your current relationship. Go back to that moment in the beginning when you were dating. And I want you to ask yourself, what was the most common activity that you did together when you first began dating? For most people, not always, but for most people, it involves some form of going out to eat or going out for drinks, right? You go out to restaurants together. You go to bars together. You try new foods together. And that can be a great form of connection. But here's the challenge. When we establish a new relationship, again, in this context, we're talking romantic, but it also is true of friendships, going back to those group rules, because now we're establishing new group rules. It can go to family as well for the same reason. But in the context of romantic relationships, when we begin that relationship centered around food, because we're going out, what ultimately ends up happening is that behavior is established as a group rule, right? The group is the couple, and that rule is we go out to eat together. That's normal. But one step further, it also becomes a thermometer that measures the health of the relationship. This is pretty significant because what that means is that when one half of the pair begins to change their relationship with food, they want to go out to eat less, they want to eat better choices. The other partner can mistake that as a change in the relationship. I'm going to say that again. When our relationships become centered around food and it becomes a core part of the identity of that relationship and how we show love to each other and how we connect with each other, when one half of that pair changes their relationship with food, the other one can mistake that as a change in the relationship. And this is why, if you've ever had this experience with a partner where this is true, where food is a main point of connection, and you start to change your behavior, they start to push back. They might try to offer to go out to eat more or push you to do that more often. They might fill the house with more tempting treats that are typical that you would enjoy together. Because for that half of the pair, it's a signal to them that the relationship is changing and they're doing what they think they need to do to salvage the relationship, to get it to go back to normal. And so there's just a disconnect for the reason that these changes are happening. You're just doing it for health because you want to feel better, you want to feel more confident, and they think the relationship is deteriorating. And that is super important to understand so that you can address it. Because if you don't understand that that's what's happening, we can mistake our partner for being malicious, for not wanting us to be happy, or for being envious, right? Going back to that pride. They don't want us to succeed. We can come up with all sorts of narratives that are often untrue for why this person is sabotaging us. And one thing I want to be clear about all of this is the majority of the time, none of this sabotage is malicious. None of it is intentionally designed for them to sabotage you. It can happen. That is rare, that you'll get someone that's just truly malicious and they don't want to see you succeed for whatever reason. Oftentimes, it's a miscommunication, or it's one of these hidden psychological mechanisms that they're being driven by to resolve their own discomfort at your changes. So we know the three reasons that social sabotage happens. Those implicit group rules that are established that we are now breaking, that other group members are trying to resolve. Members of our groups might be trying to save face, right? They're having that cognitive dissonance mismatch, and they're trying to resolve it by changing their beliefs about those behaviors. Or you might be failing the table test, which is one pair of the relationship is mistaking the changes you're making as problems in the relationship. Now, knowing that that is the reason that social sabotage happens, there are different types of sabotage that we're going to experience. And again, if you have a pen and paper next to you or in the phone, the notes app on your phone, I recommend that you write an example that you've personally experienced of either one of these. The first is direct sabotage. This is someone who might be teasing you, calling you boring, saying you're no fun anymore, trying to guilt trip you from making better choices or not making poorer choices. They guilt trip you for not wanting to go out to eat. They guilt trip you for not engaging in the snacking. They guilt trip you for not drinking at the bar, right? That is a direct form of sabotage. To be clear, direct doesn't mean conscious. It doesn't necessarily mean malicious. It just means that it is a direct form of trying to derail you from the things that you're doing. They are actively trying to push you off track. The other form of sabotage is indirect. Leaving junk food around the house, not respecting your workout time. This isn't necessarily intended to actively push you off track. It's just providing extra barriers where you would derail yourself, right? If they bring more junk food in the house, they're not telling you to eat it, but it being in your presence is tempting you to indulge in it. And that decision is what's going to throw you off track. So we have direct forms of sabotage and we have indirect. Again, as you're thinking about this in your own life, write down a couple of examples where you've experienced both, because most of us have. So now we know the three reasons that social sabotage happens based on psychology, and that's predictable. We're all members of groups, depending on what's normal in that group right now. And this is something you can think about. What do you typically do with your friends? How do you typically spend time together? Historically, what have you done? What have the behaviors been? What's normal in that group? We can predict how difficult it's going to be to change. If you're with a group of friends where their normal rules is going out drinking, you're going to experience more of the social sabotage when you try to get away from that. As an aside, this is why it's super important to try to find groups that normalize the behaviors you want to adopt. So if you want to be more active, find groups you can become a part of that are more active. And we know the two different types of sabotage, both direct and indirect. But now the most important question, what the heck can we do about it? Okay? What can we do about all this? The first is we need to know why it happens, which we solved today. Understanding, again, I want to reiterate that this form of sabotage is seldom malicious. It's driven by these subconscious psychological mechanisms that are hardwired into our brain. But knowing why they happen and how they happen sets us up to be able to do something about it. We can have honest conversations with the people closest to us that we might be experiencing this sabotage from. And this entails a couple of things. The first is to be clear and open about what your goals are and why they're meaningful to you. When we are trying to change our lifestyle, again, our decisions are also impacting the people in our life. Because if we are used to partaking in certain activities and we start doing that less, that also impacts them. And overriding that can be difficult. So sharing why it's meaningful to us, giving these people that care about us a reason to care about the changes is crucial to getting them on your side. Not only having honest conversations about your goals and why they're important, but also defining both what is and isn't helpful for you. And by doing this, what you're actually doing is you're turning that cognitive dissonance around and using it to benefit you instead of sabotaging you. Because if you have an honest conversation and you define what is and isn't helpful behavior for what you're trying to achieve, for these goals that are meaningful to you, and because these people care about you, they will commit to helping in ways that are appropriate based on your definitions. Now they've established that this is the behavior I need to do and this is good. And so now if they don't follow that, if they continue to sabotage you, now you're creating cognitive dissonance in the other direction. So having those honest conversations. Discovering new activities. If you're a part of groups where the unhealthy behaviors are currently normal, try to discover new activities that are more active, that are healthier. Start to establish new rituals, new routines, new normal behavior. Especially in romantic relationships, and especially if you're dating. If you establish the new relationship around food, it becomes a thermometer for the health of your relationship. But if you establish your relationship around something else that's not food related, a different hobby, a different activity, different behavior, then anytime you change your food, it will not have the same association. So trying to establish new normal behavior, discovering new activities together is crucial to get ahead of the sabotage and to deal with it. And the last solution I'll give you today, again, all of these you can go and apply immediately in your own lives, is to offer invitations for these people in your life to participate in the journey with you. And I will admit, a majority of the time they will probably say no. And that's okay. The invitation is not an expectation that they're going to join. But the more you offer invitations, the more chances there are for them to say yes. And eventually they will. And they might discover they enjoy it, or that they had a great time, or it was a great way to connect with you in a different way. And then that can create a cascading event where they say yes more often. Suddenly you're establishing new behaviors, new experiences, and you're rewiring the rules of the group. So these are just a few things you can do immediately today when you walk away from this workshop to start addressing the social sabotage that you're experiencing. I'm kind of right on time, so I do want to share with you what can you do now. Okay, we've talked about the 3 forms of social sabotage: the implicit group rules, these people having the discomfort of cognitive dissonance and saving face and protecting their pride by changing their beliefs about what you're doing, and the table test. We know that there are direct and indirect forms of sabotage that we've probably experienced, and we have a few solutions that we can implement immediately to start shifting or reducing the impact of that social sabotage. But if you want to go a step further, what I would recommend, and for everyone who's registered for this, you're going to get this 82% discount, is to grab our Food Freedom Bundle. Now, what is included in this? It's an online course with a variety of different modules on different topics, all related to social eating. The most relevant for today, as a part of that bundle, you're going to get 5 scripts to shut down food pushers. What these are verbatim scripts you can steal, 5 different versions that are all based in psychology that help you shut down people who are pushing food on you at social events without it being awkward, in a way that works so that they stop pushing food on you. More than just saying no. So you'll get a copy when you download the Food Freedom Bundle. You're going to get a copy of those 5 scripts and explanation for why they work so that you know which to use depending on the circumstance that you're in. But you're not only going to get that, you're also going to get our Food Freedom Framework, which is our nutrition framework that is designed to free you from restriction, deprivation, and help you develop an understanding for how to improve your nutrition if you're on a health journey in a way that allows you to still live your life, to still be social, to still enjoy your favorite foods. And when you have this understanding, nutrition becomes easy. So you're also going to get the training, the video training on our Food Freedom Framework, as well as a guide. Not only are you getting the 5 scripts, which also comes with a video, and the scripts themselves, not only are you going to get the Food Freedom Framework training video and guide, you will also get our social eating mastery course. These are additional tools and skills that you can use if you're trying to improve your lifestyle, your eating habits, and you want to still be social. There's a variety of modules and guides that are going to help you better understand how to navigate those environments so that you can have the best of both worlds. And lastly, you're also going to get our restaurant survival guide and course. This is less about the social interactions and more about what you can specifically do for yourself when you find yourself at restaurants so that you can make the best nutritional choices for you. So when you download that Food Freedom Bundle today, again, it's 82% off now. If you scan the QR code or you visit that URL at the top, 18fit.com/ff-bundle, you will be taken to the course where you can download the Food Freedom Framework videos and guide, the 5 scripts to shut down food pushers, and the video and explanation for why they work, our restaurant survival guide, and our social eating mastery course, 82% off because you joined this workshop today. Now, I hope you found this super helpful. I'm a little bit over time. So what I'll do is for all the questions that came in during this presentation, I know I didn't get a chance to answer them live here today, but what I will do is I will send an email out to everyone who's registered for this workshop, and I will answer all of those questions for you there to make sure that I address them. And of course, feel free to respond to that email if you have follow-up questions or other things that you would like to share. But thank you guys so much for joining the Social Sabotage workshop. I hope you found it insightful. My guarantee to you is that this 30 minutes would be more educational and impactful than any hour-plus long workshop you've attended in the past. And I hope that I've kept that promise to you. So I hope you all enjoy the rest of your weekend. Make sure you grab that Food Freedom Bundle now. Visit the link, grab the QR code. If you have any questions at all, feel free to respond to the emails. I will send the recording out here sometime this weekend. So if you want to go back and review what we talked about today, feel free to do so. But you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for joining. Let's get out there. Let's rewrite some group rules.